Growing up, I always knew I was the second choice. My name is Emma, and from my earliest memories, I watched my parents shower my older brother Michael with endless attention and opportunities while I stood in the shadows. The difference in how they treated us wasn't subtle, it was as clear as day. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, doing homework alone, while Mom and Dad drove Michael to his latest singing competition or club meeting. He was 3 years older than me, and somehow that made him more deserving of everything. Every time his teachers mentioned even the slightest talent, my parents jumped at the chance to nurture it, spending money we didn't really have on lessons and equipment. Michael has such a beautiful voice, Mom would gush to anyone who would listen. He's going to be something special one day. Meanwhile, I learned early on not to ask for much. When I showed interest in art classes, Mom just smiled apologetically. Maybe next semester, honey. Michael's voice lessons are taking up the budget right now. The disparity became even more apparent during Michael's senior year of high school. I was 15 at the time, sitting quietly at dinner when my parents made their big announcement. "We've been saving up," Dad said proudly, "and we're going to send Michael to Preston College. It's one of the most prestigious schools in the state." Michael's eyes lit up. "Really? That's amazing." "And that's not all," Mom added. "You can stay in our apartment near the campus. No rent, of course. We want you to focus on your studies." I pushed my peas around my plate, trying to hide my disappointment. Not that anyone was looking at me anyway. They were all focused on Michael's beaming face as he talked about his future plans. That night, lying in bed, I did the math. If they were spending this much on Michael's education and giving him a free apartment, there was no way they'd have anything left for my college fund. The realization hit me hard, but instead of crying, I started planning. The next day, I visited my grandparents' antique store. My grandfather listened as I explained my situation. "Well, Emma," he said, studying me carefully, "I could just give you the money for college." He paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "But I think it would be better if you earned it yourself. How would you like to work here after school?" So that's how it started. While Michael packed up for his prestigious college adventure, I began working at the antique store. Every afternoon after school, I'd help catalog items, assist customers, and learn the business from my grandfather. My grandmother would bring me snacks and tell me stories about the vintage pieces we sold. My parents' reaction to my initiative was telling. When I told them about my job and my plans to save for college, they seemed relieved, almost grateful that I'd solved my own problem. 3 years of working at my grandparents' antique store flew by. Every afternoon spent dusting old furniture and organizing vintage jewelry had paid off. I'd saved enough money for college. When I graduated high school, there wasn't much fanfare, just a quiet dinner at home. But I didn't mind, I was proud of what I'd accomplished on my own. I enrolled in the local state college, choosing a practical business program that wouldn't drain my savings. The tuition was reasonable, and I even had some money left over. Living at home and taking the bus to campus wasn't glamorous, but it made financial sense. "Mom, Dad," I broached the subject one evening, "I've been thinking about getting a used car. It would make getting to classes easier." Dad barely looked up from his phone. "Sorry, Emma. We just don't have the money for that right now." Mom chimed in, "The bus system is perfectly fine. Lots of students use it." I bit my tongue, remembering how they'd helped Michael get his license and even contributed to his first car. But that was ancient history now. My first year of college passed quickly, and just as I was finishing my spring finals, our house erupted with excitement. Michael was graduating from Preston College. Mom and Dad threw him an elaborate celebration, inviting what felt like half the town. Our house was packed with relatives, friends, and neighbors, all there to celebrate my brother's achievement. I was arranging appetizers in the kitchen when Michael made his grand entrance with a pretty blonde woman on his arm. Sarah, his college girlfriend. They were beaming as they walked into the room, hand in hand. "Everyone," Michael announced, commanding immediate attention, "Sarah and I have some exciting news. We're engaged." The room exploded with cheers and congratulations. Mom burst into tears of joy, and Dad clapped Michael on the back so hard I thought he might fall over. But wait, there's more, Sarah added, her voice sweet as honey. After the wedding, we'll be moving to Connecticut. My parents own a successful business there, and they want us to take it over. Mom's tears turned into full-on sobbing. My baby boy, a successful businessman. That's my son, Dad proclaimed proudly. Always knew you were destined for great things. I stood in the corner, watching the scene unfold. Nobody seemed to notice that I'd just finished my freshman year with a 4.0 GPA, or that I'd been working part-time at a local cafe while maintaining my studies. But I was used to it by now. The wedding preparations consumed the next year. While I focused on my studies, now in my third year, Mom and Dad threw themselves into planning the perfect wedding for their perfect son. They took out a substantial loan to cover everything: the venue, the catering, the flowers, the band. Nothing was too good for Michael and Sarah. The wedding itself was exactly what you'd expect: extravagant, emotional, and all about Michael. I stood in my bridesmaid dress, which I had to pay for myself, watching my parents beam with pride as they danced with the happy couple. They'd spared no expense, even though I knew they'd be paying off the loan for years to come. After Michael and Sarah left for Connecticut, I stood in my cramped bedroom at my parents' house, staring at my textbooks. An idea struck me: the apartment where Michael had lived during college was now empty. It was perfectly located near campus, and it would give me some much-needed independence. I approached my parents that evening while they were watching TV. Mom, Dad, since Michael's apartment is empty now, would it be okay if I moved in there? They exchanged glances before Mom spoke. Well, honey, you can move in, but you'll need to pay rent. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Rent? But Michael lived there for free. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his recliner. That was different. We have the wedding loan to pay off now. We need the extra income. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm your daughter too, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I've never asked you for anything. I worked for my college money. I take the bus everywhere. Mom held up her hand to stop me. She and Dad had one of their silent conversations, the kind they used to have when deciding whether to spend money on another of Michael's activities. Fine, Mom finally said. We'll charge you half the normal rent. I wanted to argue more, but I knew this was the best offer I'd get. Okay, I'll take it. That weekend, I moved into the apartment. It still had traces of Michael everywhere: holes in the walls from his college posters, water rings on the coffee table from his late-night study sessions. I took extra shifts at the cafe to cover the rent, often working until closing time. Between classes, studying, and work, I barely had time to sleep. My final year of college passed in a blur of textbooks, coffee shop aprons, and midnight study sessions. Before I knew it, graduation day arrived. While my classmates' families planned parties and celebrations, my parents opted for a quiet dinner at home. They only invited my grandparents, no extended family, no friends, no elaborate catering like Michael's graduation. We sat around the dining room table, eating the lasagna I'd made myself. Grandma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Emma, dear, we're so proud of you, she said warmly. Graduating with highest honors while working part-time, that's quite an achievement. Before I could respond, Mom's phone buzzed. Her face lit up as she read the message. Oh, speaking of achievements, she interrupted, Michael just texted. The business is doing wonderfully. He says they're expanding into 2 new locations. I watched as my graduation dinner turned into a celebration of Michael's success in Connecticut. My grandparents exchanged knowing looks, and Grandpa squeezed my shoulder supportively. My hard work in college paid off sooner than I expected. Within 2 weeks of graduation, I landed a position at Anderson & Mitchell, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. The starting salary was better than I dared hope for, and I was thrilled to finally be starting my career. That excitement lasted exactly 3 days, until my parents found out about my salary. Emma, Mom said during one of her unexpected visits to the apartment, now that you're making good money, you should start paying the full rent amount. I stared at her, wondering if I'd heard correctly. But we agreed on half. That was when you were a student, she replied matter-of-factly. You can afford it now. I wanted to point out that Michael had lived here for free even after getting a job, but I'd learned that comparing myself to my brother was pointless. The apartment's location was perfect, just a 10-minute walk from my office, so I reluctantly agreed. Life fell into a routine. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my worth at the company. Every month, like clockwork, Mom would call. Emma, dear, just reminding you about the rent. It's due on Friday. We're counting on that money. 3 years passed this way. I earned a significant promotion and raise, but I kept that information to myself. I'd learned my lesson. Any hint of financial success would just lead to more demands from my parents. Through their occasional updates, I heard that Michael and Sarah had a baby boy. I'd seen pictures on social media, but hadn't visited. Our communication had dwindled to perfunctory birthday messages and holiday greetings. I was fine with that. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Emma? Mom's voice was tight with tension. We need to talk about your brother. There's been some trouble. The business, well, it's gone bankrupt. He had a terrible fight with Sarah's parents. They're furious about how he managed things. They're not speaking anymore. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was heading. He's coming back home, she continued. With Sarah and the baby. Oh, I said carefully. I assume he'll be staying with you and Dad? Actually, Mom paused. That apartment you're in is quite large. He'll be staying there. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What? Mom, this is my home. I've been living here for years. Don't be dramatic, Emma. Your brother needs help. He doesn't have any money right now, so he'll stay there for free. You can keep paying the rent. That's absurd, I protested. If he's moving in, maybe I should just find my own place. Don't you dare, Mom's voice turned sharp. We need your rent money now more than ever. Michael's going through a rough time, you wouldn't want to make things harder for him, would you? I shook my head in disbelief and hung up without another word. The moving day was worse than I'd imagined. Michael, Sarah, and their crying baby Tommy showed up with a mountain of luggage and baby equipment. Mom arrived to supervise the transition, which apparently meant making my life as uncomfortable as possible. Emma, clear out your room, Mom directed, hands on her hips. Michael and Sarah need it for Tommy's nursery. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, my personal space for the past 4 years. What? Where am I supposed to sleep? The living room has a perfectly good couch, she replied, already starting to move my things. You can't be serious. I pay rent here, full rent, and you're putting me on the couch. Mom's expression hardened. Don't be selfish, Emma. Your brother has a baby. Babies need proper rooms. So I watched helplessly as my bedroom was transformed into a nursery, complete with a crib, changing table, and all the other baby paraphernalia. My belongings were unceremoniously piled in a corner of the living room, which was now my bedroom. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Michael moped around the apartment all day, alternating between complaining about his in-laws and reminiscing about his glory days as a successful businessman. Sarah spent her time either crying or arguing with Michael about whose turn it was to change Tommy's diaper. The baby seemed to sense the tension and cried constantly. I'd come home from a long day at work to find dishes piled in the sink, toys scattered everywhere, and dirty laundry spilling out of the hamper. The first few times, I tried ignoring the mess, but the dirty dishes attracted ants, and the clutter made it impossible to relax in what was now my bedroom. So I cleaned, I cooked, I did laundry. And every meal I prepared mysteriously disappeared before I could eat it. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day at work, I decided to extend an olive branch. Michael, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, we actually have some openings at my company. I could put in a good word for you with HR. The benefits are great, and the starting salary is decent. Michael looked up from his phone, his face twisting with indignation. An entry-level position? Are you kidding me? I'm a businessman, Emma, I don't do entry-level. I need an executive position, something worthy of my experience. Your experience running a business into the ground? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Michael's face turned red. You don't know anything about what happened. That was my in-laws' fault. They set me up to fail. He stormed off to his room, my old room, leaving me standing there, wondering how much longer I could live like this. 3 months into our forced cohabitation, I sat at my kitchen table, now covered in Tommy's dried baby food and Sarah's coffee rings, reviewing my bank statements. The numbers didn't lie, my expenses had nearly doubled since Michael and his family moved in. That was the final push I needed to call my parents. I rehearsed what I would say, determined to remain calm and rational. The phone conversation went about as well as expected. Mom, Dad, we need to talk about the living situation, I began. Michael and Sarah aren't contributing anything to the household expenses. They're eating all my food, using utilities I pay for, and... Emma, Mom cut me off, her voice sharp. I can't believe how selfish you're being. Your brother lost everything. His in-laws betrayed him. He has a baby to take care of. Dad's voice joined in from the background. You should be grateful you're in a position to help family. But that's just it, I pressed on. I'm not just helping, I'm carrying the entire financial burden. They don't buy groceries, they don't. Enough, Mom snapped. Your brother is going through a difficult time. This isn't forever. You need to be more understanding. That night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. I bookmarked several promising options, all within walking distance of my office. Just in case, I told myself. Just in case things get worse. Things got worse exactly 2 weeks later. I was sitting on my couch bed, trying to focus on work documents while Tommy wailed in the background and Michael and Sarah had their fourth argument of the day. The doorbell rang, and my parents walked in without waiting for anyone to answer. Mom had that look on her face, the one she used to get right before announcing Michael had been enrolled in another expensive program. Dad stood behind her, avoiding eye contact. Emma, we need to discuss the rent, Mom announced. I looked up from my laptop. I paid this month's rent on time, as always. Yes, but starting next month, we're doubling it. The room fell silent, even Tommy stopped crying. I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard. Double? But I'm already paying the full market rate. Mom gestured around the apartment. Well, now there are more people living here. More wear and tear on the property. More utilities being used. It's only fair that the rent reflects that. Fair? I couldn't help but laugh. How is it fair that I should pay double rent for being forced to sleep on a couch in my own living room? If anyone should pay more, it should be Michael. He's the one who... I'm not paying anything, Michael jumped up from his chair. This is ridiculous. I lost everything, and now you want me to pay rent? Of course not, sweetie, Mom soothed, before turning back to me with a harder expression. Emma, you have a good job. You can afford this. Your brother needs time to get back on his feet. I looked at each of their faces, Mom's stern expectation, Dad's awkward avoidance, Michael's entitled indignation, Sarah's smug satisfaction. 3 months of built-up frustration threatened to explode, but I swallowed it down. Instead, I simply nodded. Fine, I said quietly. Double rent, starting next month. Mom's face broke into a satisfied smile. She and Dad left shortly after, clearly pleased with how smoothly their announcement had gone. They had no idea they'd just given me the push I needed to finally make my decision. Later that evening, while trying to read a book on my uncomfortable couch bed, I overheard Michael and Sarah talking in the kitchen. They were trying to whisper, but their excitement made them careless. Can you believe it? Sarah giggled. Your mom just told me they're going to give us half of Emma's rent money every month. Michael's smug reply made my blood boil. Of course they are. They understand we need help right now. Emma makes plenty of money, she can support us for a while. This is perfect, Sarah continued. We get to live here for free, and we'll even have spending money. Your sister doesn't need to know. I lay there, gripping my book so hard my knuckles turned white. All this time, I'd thought my parents were just being unfair, but this was a calculated scheme. They weren't just enabling Michael, they were actively planning to use me to fund his laziness. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the apartment listings I'd bookmarked. One caught my eye, a modern one-bedroom in a quiet building, actually closer to my office than the current apartment. The rent was exactly what I'd been paying before the proposed increase. I called the number immediately, trying to keep my voice down. Hi, I'm interested in the apartment on Cedar Street. Yes, I could come see it right now if that's possible. Perfect, I'll be there in 15 minutes. The apartment was everything I hoped for, clean, quiet, and Michael-free. I signed the lease on the spot and paid the security deposit with my emergency savings. Back at the apartment, I waited until everyone was asleep before quietly packing my essential belongings into 2 large suitcases. I left my furniture, it wasn't worth the hassle, and I could buy new pieces that didn't have memories of this mess attached to them. The next morning, I wheeled my suitcases to the door while Michael sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through job listings he had no intention of applying to. Going somewhere? He asked, barely looking up. Month-long business trip, I lied smoothly. Big project in our Cincinnati office. He just grunted, already uninterested. I moved into my new apartment that evening, ordering takeout and sitting on the floor of my empty living room. The silence was beautiful. No crying baby, no arguing couple, no guilt-tripping parents. Just peace. For the next month, I lived quietly in my new home. I bought a comfortable bed, a cozy couch that wasn't a bed, and kitchen supplies that only I would use. I cooked meals that stayed in my refrigerator until I ate them. I slept through the night without being awakened by Tommy's crying. Then, right on schedule, my phone rang with my mother's number. Emma, she snapped without preamble, why haven't you sent the full rent payment? We agreed on double, remember? I couldn't help but laugh. Actually, Mom, I know all about your little arrangement with Michael and Sarah. Were you planning to tell me that half my rent money was going straight into their pockets? That's none of your business. Your brother needs. No, Mom, I interrupted, still chuckling. What my brother needs is to grow up and take responsibility for once in his life. I've moved out, found my own place. The apartment is all yours and Michael's now. You what? She screeched. You can't do this. We need that rent money. Well, I'm sure Michael will step up and start paying rent now that he's had time to get back on his feet. I can't wait to see how that works out for you. There was a moment of silence on the phone after my declaration. I could almost hear the gears turning in my mother's head as reality finally sank in. Their reliable source of income was gone, and all they had left was their unemployed son who had never paid a bill in his life. Emma, sweetie, Mom's voice suddenly turned sugary sweet, a tone I recognized from childhood when she wanted something. Let's not be hasty. We can work something out. What if we go back to the original rent amount? That was fair, wasn't it? I settled deeper into my new couch, the one I'd picked out myself, in my own apartment, where no one could kick me out of my bedroom. No, Mom, that's not going to happen. But Emma, we're family. You can't just. Family? I interrupted. Is that what you call it when you scheme behind my back to funnel my money to Michael? When you kick me out of my own bedroom while I'm paying all the bills? When you've spent my entire life treating me like an ATM while treating Michael like royalty? That's not fair, we've always. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. That was 6 months ago. My grandparents keep me updated on the situation, though I never ask, they just know I need to hear it, need to know I made the right choice. According to them, Michael, Sarah, and Tommy are still living in the apartment. They haven't paid a single month's rent. Mom and Dad are covering all the utilities, plus giving them spending money because the baby needs things. My brother still hasn't found a job. Apparently, there just aren't enough executive positions available for failed businessmen with a track record of bankruptcy. My new life is peaceful. I got another promotion at work, bought myself a car, and started taking evening classes for my MBA. My apartment is always clean, my food stays in my fridge until I want to eat it, and I sleep in my own bed every night. The other day, I ran into Sarah's cousin at the grocery store. She told me they're expecting another baby. I just smiled and wished them well, knowing that somewhere across town, my parents are probably already figuring out how to pay for another nursery. But that's not my problem anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. And it feels absolutely right.